A bombshell report about the FBI spying on Republican senators. We have a deep dive look at the upcoming Supreme Court term. All of that and so much more today on 10-Minute Drill.
Everybody get up, get up.
The story of America is the story of an adventure.
I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you.
We are a nation under God, and I believe God intended for us to be free.
On Monday, a bombshell report was released by the Senate Judiciary Committee revealing that the FBI had tapped phone records of 8 Republican senators as a part of the probe into the January 6th fallout. Attorney General Pam Bondi testified in the Senate on Tuesday on this issue.
This is the kind of conduct that shatters the American people's faith in our law enforcement system. We will work to earn that back every single day.
Republican senators are demanding transparency into this and investigation into how this was allowed to happen under the Biden administration. We will report back as more findings come out. In her appearance before the Senate Judiciary Committee, Attorney General Pam Bondi made a point of calling out Senator Sheldon Whitehouse.
When you talk about corruption and money, that when you pushed for legislation that would subsidize your wife's company.
The questions here are actually pretty specific. So having you respond with completely irrelevant far-right internet talking points really is not very helpful here.
Far-right internet talking points. Well, let's check the record on that. Here's from Fox News. Meet Sandra Whitehouse, whose husband's votes funneled millions into NGO that pays her. We have talked extensively here about Sheldon Whitehouse's wife's work for an organization called Ocean Conservancy, and the fact that Sheldon Whitehouse has voted multiple times for grant programs that have diverted money directly to her organization that she and Sheldon in turn have profited from. I'm going to read this from Fox. Ocean Conservancy has notably received more than $14.2 million in federal grants since 2008, according to usaspending.gov. It was given 2 sizable grants in just 2024. The former was funded by the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill, and the latter was funded by the EPA's Annual Appropriations Bill. The senator voted for both. So again, as Senator Whitehouse attempts to dismiss these as internet far-right talking points, the record's pretty clear. There are financial documents that show the fact that Sheldon Whitehouse's wife's organization received this money from these grant programs, and the record is also very clear on the fact that Sheldon Whitehouse voted for them. So once again, a reminder that the Democrat Party's czar of internet conspiracy theory lore and dark money conspiracy theories is also a major corrupt figure in this story. On Tuesday, we talked extensively about the dynamics of the current shutdown and the fact that the longer it goes on, the worse it gets for Democrats, in part because people are getting to know more and more about just how absurd the Democrats' demands are. Everything from that free healthcare for illegal immigrants to giving Medicaid to, able-bodied couch potatoes playing video games in their underwear, but also the absurdity of the Obamacare premium subsidies that we talked about extensively give taxpayer dollar subsidies to families making $600,000 a year. Absurd. My point was proven with new polling from Harvard-Harris. 70% oppose the government shutdown. 65% say Democrats should accept Republicans' clean, nonpartisan continuing resolution. 55% say Democrats are just trying to please their base. Monday night, Democrats once again voted against the bill that would reopen the government and begin the debate on all these issues that they care about. We will continue to track this closely and highlight the different ways Democrats are making this more difficult for themselves. We wanted to give a quick preview. We are 1 month out from major elections, both in Virginia and New Jersey. Virginia we've talked about quite extensively. At the top of the ticket, you have Abigail Spanberger, who has gotten a lot of heat over the last several months for refusing to answer questions on, first, the primary major issue of allowing men into women's locker rooms, bathrooms, and sports. Spanberger has avoided this question like the plague, which has left Virginians wondering what is her actual position on this policy. But this race has also been completely upended by revelations that we covered on Tuesday of Democrat Attorney General candidate Jay Jones fantasizing about murdering his political opponents, watching their children die, and also talking favorably about what would happen if police were killed in the line of duty. The Fraternal Order of Police has already called on Jones to drop out, which is very difficult for somebody who wants to serve as the top law enforcement officer in the state. Spanberger continues to avoid answering that question at all. Spanberger and Republican candidate Winsome Earl Sears will face off tonight in a gubernatorial debate. Down in New Jersey, this race has also been upended by a Democrat candidate who has failed to answer basic questions and provide transparency. One issue that particularly percolated in the last month was a question that she got on the show The Breakfast Club about stock trades.
Well, did you make $7 million in stock trades at all? Or?
I haven't. I don't believe I did, but I'd have to go see.
The fact that she can't answer whether or not she's made $7 million is, one, troubling because of how corrupt it is, but two, makes you wonder just how much Mikey Sherrill might have actually made during her time in public service. The second issue that's arisen that has driven a lot of questions about Mikey Sherrill's character is a cheating scandal at the Naval Academy, one that led to her not being able to walk in her graduation. She has tried to make that into a process argument about the fact that those records about her time in the Naval Academy were obtained illegally, but she cannot get away from questions about what happened and a new narrative that she's not being transparent with voters in New Jersey. Sherrill also raised eyebrows after the assassination of Charlie Kirk when she released a lengthy statement, which we talked about here on 10 Minute Drill, condemning Charlie Kirk and essentially justifying the assassination based on some of his rhetoric and past positions that he had taken. It was a bizarre position for Sherrill to take and completely unnecessary, but highlighted the fact that Sherrill is likely leaning into a strategy of trying to energize her base by appealing to the far left in New Jersey. But the fourth, and what I believe might end up being one of the most animating dynamics of this election, is utility bills. In a previous debate, Sherrill talked about her plan to freeze utility bills at their current level, which right now is already way too high, so that's not going to help anybody. But the other problem for her is her role in driving up those utility bills. We have talked here on 10 Minute Drill about her role working with Governor Phil Murphy and Joe Biden to attack every reliable energy source with surgical precision, which has driven up utility bills, which has really harmed people's ability to access reliable energy and forced them to rely on importing energy from other states. And so Mikey Sherrill's name is all over those giant utility bills that people are facing in New Jersey as they head to the polls this November. We will track closely these next few weeks how these dynamics shift both in Virginia and New Jersey, but it looks like it's going to be a very interesting race with a lot of late last-minute dynamics. This week, the Supreme Court convened for their new term, and we wanted to give you a preview of some of the most notable cases they will be discussing this term. First, from Carrie Severino. Another eventful term in the making. This summer break did not feel like much of a break with all the emergency docket activity generated by liberal judges, but the new term of the Supreme Court has arrived. The cases on the docket present a number of important questions that include equal protection, free speech, federal versus state courts, and the separation of powers and voting. You'll remember last term, the Supreme Court dealt with the issue of biological men in women's sports, dealing with a case out of Tennessee. This term, they are dealing with two additional cases, both from West Virginia and from Idaho. That is West Virginia versus BPJ and Little versus Hecox. Another notable case dealing with a pregnancy resource center in New Jersey. The Attorney General of New Jersey has been harassing this pregnancy resource center, demanding documents and sensitive information about donors and patients and attendees. That case is called First Choice Women's Resource Center versus Platkin. Then there are several cases dealing with presidential authority. First, does President Trump have the authority to remove an FTC commissioner? That case is Trump versus Slaughter. But then also President Trump's ability to remove a Federal Reserve Board member, Lisa Cook, in Trump versus Cook. One case that is expected to get some of the most attention of this entire term because of the policy implications will be a case related to President Trump's tariffs. That case is Trump versus VOS Selections, questioning whether the International Emergency Economic Powers Act empowers the president to impose tariffs. And then the last case that we'll talk about today is Louisiana versus Calais, which deals with whether or not states have the ability to draw maps based on race. This is a question that's dealt with in the Voting Rights Act that will get a lot of attention and a lot of pushback. But the Supreme Court in a previous session already dealt with this to a certain degree and will continue to ask some of those same questions as they address this case. On Tuesday, we talked about the dynamic of President Trump sending in federal help to support Federal buildings in cities like Chicago and Portland that have been overrun, protested, attacked by left-wing protesters. In Portland, this has been an interesting narrative now for several months, with some in the media coming in to downplay the unrest that they've seen. This is New York Times reporter Nick Kristof.
Be careful. Portland is on fire. Our president says so. You can hear the artillery booming. The rival gangs fighting.
He tweeted, "My video report from the perilous front lines of what President Trump described as war-ravaged Portland, a city on fire requiring troops to come save us." Now, it's important to note that where Kristof filmed this video is about 12 miles from the ICE facility that most of the protests and activity has been happening on. Also, most of the unrest has happened at night. He found a random place 12 miles away to film this kind of weird theater kid video poking around to try and downplay what's going on. But we've seen now, thanks to the internet, the fact that it's 2025 and everyone in the world has a camera on their cell phone, what this actually looks like.
Night after night, this is the scene just outside the ICE facility in Portland.
Whoever told Mr. Kristof that this video was a good idea clearly does not have his best interest at heart, not only because of the circumstances around it that we previously outlined, but in his kind of quirky Monopoly Man outfit that he appears to be going to some kind of gala, he just looks bizarrely out of touch and not like somebody that people would rely on for clear information about what's going on in American cities. That is all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for joining us on 10 Minute Drill. Please like, subscribe, tell your friends. We'll see you next time.